Not from Leuven this time, but from Lyon Catholic University in France. And you have been involved, Justin Hagerman, yes, in the Catalogue of Textual Variants using, this is your paper, a Catalogue of Textual Variants using BiblIndex to compare occurrences of Paul's epistles to the Galatians and Philippians in patristic sources. Yes, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for your introduction. And I think the advantage of giving a paper before our tea break is that I could go way over time without any consequences. Yes, that's right. So I present to you a 2-hour lecture. Really, here is the program for 20 minutes. We're spending a very little amount of, I really want to present as many examples as we can. And I also present to you a beautiful picture not far from us in Liverpool. I really appreciate the title, A Man Possibly Sent Paul, reading from a scroll. We might ask the audience who was in this audience, perhaps us in Birmingham. We are presented in the picture with Paul. But as you can see, yes, it will be a fairly focused paper. I really want to get the time down as kind of strictly as I can. But first, I'd like to give thanks to the conference organizer, Hugh Houghton. Thank you, and to the University of Birmingham for this lovely occasion. It's really a pleasure to join you all this year in person, having very much really had the pleasure to be with you in 2023 from Lyon, thanks to Zoom. And I'd like to begin with, as well, likewise, warm welcome to participants on Zoom. Good to see you. Bienvenue, good to see you. And I'd like to begin with the simplicity of this research method. I think here you see step one is research by biblical reference. We have, for example, it's really 3 steps. First, search for the BiblIndex by biblical reference. Second, open up the search to, the search by patristic corpus. And finally, the third step is to see the results and then have the chance to take a closer look at the text. And so here is the presentation of the kinds of results that you will see. Yes, at this stage in the research, I'm using the data available in the BiblIndex. There are approximately 600,000 references and counting. I have to update that. There might be 800,000 references, but between 600,000 and 800,000 references, we have a lot to work with. And this is continually being updated as well. And I wish to signal that the catalog of Galatians 1, chapter 1, verses 1 to 10 amounts to 617 lines in an Excel file. By comparison, Philippians 1, 1 to 10 amounts to 198 lines in an Excel file. Despite the high quantity of this data, it seems that the best option is to continue working on the rest of Galatians chapter 1 and then Philippians chapter 1, with a vision for extending the research into the remaining chapters, Galatians 2 to 6, as well as Philippians 2 to 4. And this part is very much statistic, a lot of numbers, but within the frame of literature from the first 6 centuries, according to critical editions like Source Chrétienne, then we have the PG, the Greek Patrology and Latin Patrology. I've found the following statistics for Galatians 1, 1 to 24. The range is from 7 occurrences, Galatians 1:24 up to 70. So this might be a helpful graphic to stay with for a couple minutes. I provide here, I also provide here a selection of 30 authors who cite Galatians chapter 1. Representing the most citations are Jean Chrysostom with 103. And here we have another graphic. Yes, John Chrysostom with 103 citations and Jerome with 84. Origen is close to this level at 65, as well as Cyril of Alexandria, 56. And I also highlight Theodoret, Ambrose Aster, Eusebius, and Basil of Caesarea. We have a 36, 35, in the range of 36, 35, 30, and then 27. From this data set, it is also possible to see the distributions of verses within the works of a single author. For example, the verse that Basil cites the most often is Galatians 1:10, here at 11 times. If we compare Cyril of Alexandria, the verse that he returns to the most is Galatians 1:1 at 13 times. followed by Galatians 1:12 at 8 times. I also present to you Didymus of Alexandria and Gregory of Nyssa. They show a relative range that these authors can cover from 1 to 1 and 121 in Gregory of Nyssa. The case of Galatians 1 in John Chrysostom is striking because he not only cites nearly every verse in Galatians 1, with the exception of 1:11, but he also does so with relatively high level of frequency. Origen, by comparison, arguably shows similar range of citations, but his uses of Galatians 1 are slightly less proportionate, I would say. See here his 18 uses of Galatians 1:4. And when we look to Theodoret of Cyr, his range is as extensive as John Chrysostom's, but we also notice that the most Theodoret cites a verse from Galatians 1 is 3 times. So I think this is another comparison I'd really like to spend more time with is this between, Origen and Theodoret of Cyr. Just at the level of a graphic, it's interesting to see this difference. And finally, I also signal to you, before turning to specific examples, I wish to signal that Galatians 1 is treated in a similar way by Theodoret and Ambros Esther. I think we see a wide range, but a low numbers of citing each particular verse. And finally, it is Jerome who shows a similar pattern, I would say, to that of John Chrysostom, in the sense that both authors cite nearly each verse from Galatians 1, and that they do so more often than other writers. And I also provide a list of, I might need to come back to this at a different point, but this is a list of anonymous sources where Galatians 1 also appears, and authors who cite Galatians 1 less often, but I think they will require more analysis. For instance, Zechariah the rhetorician, I'd like to get in, he cites Galatians 1:8 and 1:9, but I haven't really had I will not present his variations today. I'd like to maybe return to that author at a different point. And so the first example is Galatians 1:1. Here we see 4 similar texts in Cyril of Alexandria, Eusebius, John Chrysostom, and Theodoret. By comparison, Gregory of Nyssa also provides, he uses the preposition ex in the place of apo. In this same text, Gregory of Nyssa also provides the reading ἀνθρώπων instead of ἀνθώπου, a variation that is also attested in Origen, in Origen's commentary on John. When we look more closely at the data from Cyril of Alexandria, we also see that twice he provides this same word that Gregory of Nyssa and Origen use. And finally, once in Theodoret is the ἀνθρώπων evident in this case here. And it's interesting, we might come back to this as well. I wouldn't say he adds to the text, but he's also using this gar face and fall. I think that came up in previous papers. Maybe that's a rhetorical device. I'm not sure yet how to classify that, but we'll keep that open for discussion too. The second example for comparison is Galatians 1:6. Cyril, Jean Chrysostom, and Basil each modify the en kahiti with the word Christou. There is one variant, however, in Theodoret's commentaries on the Pauline Epistles, where he uses the word theou instead of Christou. And how much we want to attribute significance to that, I'm not really in a position to say, but it's interesting just to note that the difference is there. And in the 2 examples of Galatians 1:6 and Eusebius, we see that he maintains the verse, though without citing the expression introduced by the verb thaumazo here. Yes, in fact, we see a different tendency in John Chrysostom. In 4 out of 5 citations of Galatians 1:6, he provides only this initial expression introduced by this verb thaumazo. Yes. Turning now to a third example, we have Galatians 1:9. One difference to note is between Basil and Theodoret. Basil provides the verb lego, whereas Theodoret uses legomen. Otherwise, the verse is cited in the same way, word for word. Yes, I think that's right, word for word. The variants are also evident between Phileopius, who uses humin rather than humas, as well as a different grammatical construction here, the conditional. And to add further, Chrysostom's corpus shows 3 variations of this verse, Galatians 1:9, whether in humas or humin in his homilies on Romans, or in the grammatical construction, we see ean with the verb ean zetai in his homilies on 2 Corinthians. And the fourth example to consider is Galatians 1:10. Here, there are similarities between Cyril, Chrysostom, and Theodoret. Shorter forms of this verse are evident in Apollinarius of Laodicea, Gregory of Nyssa, Didymus, and Basil. And here, I only note the absence of AT in Didymus's commentary on Genesis. The first part of Galatians 1:10 is cited similarly by Cyril and Didymus, with only the ton absent in Didymus's commentary on Job. And finally, the second part of Galatians 1:10 is cited similarly by Cyril of Alexandria and Gregory of Nyssa, with only the very brief, what I might call interlude that Paulos face C. But other than this, the two authors share the citation, the text. Yes. So I want to take a look at the time. Yes. So far we've noted different nuances, and this kind of comparison seems fruitful to continue. I propose, let's see what we find in relation to Paul's letter to the Philippians. I'll present you with the graphic here. First, an overview of citations of Philippians 1 to 30 in sources from the first 6 centuries, reconstructing critical editions. The range here is from 6 occurrences in Philippians 1:26, the lowest point there, to 135, Philippians 1:23. And to be honest with you, I kept thinking I was making a typo, adding an extra figure there, but you can see how Philippians 1:23 is actually 135 occurrences. The verses from Philippians chapter 1 are most highly represented in the works of, once again, John Chrysostom, with 152 occurrences, but also in Ambrose of Milan. Ambrose of Milan is at 43. Origen coming in at 40, Theodoret at 35, Basil at 34, Cyril at 24, Jerome 23, and Ambrose Aster at 21. So first, both Basil and Cyril cover a wide range of verses from Philippians 1. You see Cyril and Basil here. Yes. However, a different pattern is evident in Didymus. Yes, Didymus here. And here Didymus cites Philippians 1:23 12 times, only referring to 5 other verses 1 time. You see the distribution here as well. Gregory of Nyssa also shows a tendency to cite Philippians 1:23 more than other verses, yet even so, 1:21 is cited 3 times and Philippians 1:6 cited twice. In Chrysostom, we see both high range and higher numbers of citations. Philippians 1:23 is in fact on a similar level as 1:7, 1:14, and and 1:29. So you see a higher frequency of citation. By comparison, Origen also shows a relatively high range of verses cited from Philippians 1, but what is still pronounced in his works, like that of Didymus, is a tendency to cite Philippians 1:23, here we see 10 times, much more often than other verses. See the next highest number of occurrences here is for Philippians 1:11 at 4 times and Philippians 1:29 at 4 times. When we come back to Theodoret of Cyr, we see a much different pattern. And I would say, as far as the history of graphs is concerned, this must be in the running for one of the most beautiful. such balance, such grace by Theodoret. This is really, indeed, here Theodoret cites each and every verse from Philippians 1. Yet the most that he does so is twice, at maximum. And see what liberty he takes by citing Philippians 1:13, 1:18, 1:20, and 1:22 more than 1 time. It's a great liberty that he's taking. 2 occurrences. And what is also striking is that unlike Origen and Didymus, Theodoret does not show a tendency to cite Philippians 1:23 twice as much or even more than other verses from Philippians 1. But before turning to our examples, I also signal a similar style that I think is evident in Occurrences there. This citation at max 2 times, but covering a wide range. And I would like to also, this I think is to be compared with Jerome's 13 citations of Philippians 1:23. So I think we see more, maybe if we're, this needs a lot more work, but we see maybe more similarities between this return to Philippians 1:23, we're a little bit more was stoic, a little more balanced throughout Theodoret and Ambrose-Esther. So, and I'd like to, yes, turn to our examples. The first example to compare is Philippians 1:2. So here, this verse appears in Cyril. Yes, Cyril, Chrysostom, and Theodoret. The only differences that I've identified are in Cyril's words. In his comments on the Pentateuch, he introduces facine in the middle of the citation. Cyril uses facine similarly in his dialogue on adoration and worship. Yes, here we have facine again in his dialogue on adoration and worship in spirit and in truth, where we also see 2 uses of haemon. This is another difference in comparison with the other texts. And once, haemon is used once with theos patros, and once more with Kyriou Iesu Christou. And by comparison, Chrysostom and Theodoret's citations of Philippians 1:2 show only 1 use of haemon. When we turn to Philippians 1:6, we see that Chrysostom can also introduce, Chrysostom can also introduce facine with the Pauline verse. Apart from this facine, the citation is identical in Chrysostom and Theodoret. One difference is evident, however, in Cyril's use of the verb epitelesato. Here we have epitelesato. And compare with the epitelese. Yes. And other variants are evident. Cyril uses epitelesato with oxamenos. Compare with we have other examples of en oxamenos without the prefix here. And Barsanuphius uses the form tele eso ese. See his use here. Quite a bit of variation on this particular verb. And Gregory of Nyssa employs epitelesai. We have Gregory of Nyssa's variation on this verb. In Didymus's fragments on the Psalm, I'm sorry, yes, Gregory of Nyssa is Gregory of Nyssa here. Didymus is fragment on the Psalms. This is where it's really interesting as well. 2 differences are evidence in comparison with other authors. Citation of Philippians 1:6. First, we see ton oxamenon, and then secondly, we see ergu agothou. Compare with ergon agathon. Right. So quite a few different. I think it will also be worth our time to return to 1:6 to discuss some of these very interesting variations. And an example showing much less variation in patristic sources is Philippians 1:9. And I might pass to 1:10 as well. So you have a presentation of 1:9 with, again, this facine coming in Chrysostom and also facine in Philemon of Alexandria. But to conclude our comparisons of cited verses on a note of harmony, the example of Philippians 1:10. 3 authors, Clement of Alexandria, Chrysostom, and Theodoret, cite what we might consider to be the first part of Philippians 10, beginning with the ἑαυτοῦ. And 2 authors, Epiphanius and Basil of Caesarea, cite what we might consider to be the second part of Philippians 1:10, beginning with the hina. And perhaps one thing to note here is that in one example from his rules, Basil cites, he does not include the hina to begin. He passes directly to, yes, he does not use the hina in one example from his rules. Yes, we come now to our conclusions. the data text provided by Critical Editions for Galatians 1 to 10 and Philippians 1 to 10 are identified, but there is always need to refresh the catalogs and to analyze variants in more detail. I have only presented 8 out of the 20 verses from this initial data set, Galatians 1 to 10 and Philippians 1 to 10. I think that analyzing the rest of Galatians 1 and Philippians 1 is manageable. And after catching our breath, we can then continue with Galatians 2:6 and Philippians 2:4. And finally, I'd also like to set out a couple of ideas for further directions. First, it would be useful to organize Pauline citations according to time, place, and literary genre. I think that would introduce another round of really fascinating comparisons to make. And second, it seems fruitful to expand the data sets. And here I think of Ephesians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, which will, for some reason, when I drafted this PowerPoint, I did not include 1st Thessalonians, but that's a fault on my side. I'd like to add 1st Thessalonians back into this group. So I think it might be a lapsus for some reason. But I'd also like to think of these, I think of Ephesians and Colossians and will be like a nice pleasant walk or a jog, whereas Philemon will be a sprint. And finally, Romans, 1 Corinthians, and 2 Corinthians will be like marathon or even a double marathon, I think. That said, I remain optimistic about research on Pauline citations in patristic sources, which is moving in promising and new ways. Thank you very much.
Paul Foster? No, I'm just. Under title.
For the distribution of citations from verses on each author, couldn't it be that the literary genre is the key to understanding why Theodoret has such a balance for the commentary?
Yes.
Compared to apologies where you might do more sporadically from the verse.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I think what we also, interestingly, it would be, what I'd like to do is to go back and to see which works. I think the next step here will be to show the distribution, but also add the work as well, because I think you are right that if we take a look at John Chrysostom's literary genre, he's often commenting on the letter to the Philippians, whereas I think yes, for now, I'm not sure which sources Origen is using, but if he's coming back to Philippians 1:23, why might he be doing this? He's often interpreting, yes, his commentary on Matthew is actually a text where I find this verse is highly present, and I'm puzzled by this. I don't know why, for instance, he's using Philippians 1:23 to consistently interpret the Gospel of Matthew. But I think if we extend this further, let's try to get into other passages like letters. I think Gregory of Nyssa is a good example here. Paul is most present in Gregory of Nyssa's letters, whereas his treatises, I'm not finding as much Pauline citations in Gregory of Nyssa. But I think that would be so really helpful to compare authors by Paul is cited in which particular works. I think that's going to show us another range of insight. And for instance, I just conclude with, it is true, Theodoret's references. I found all of these references in PG 82, which it's become kind of dear to me. It's PG 82. I go back to this often. But I think it's right, we see Pauline interpreted in Theodoret, he's focusing strictly on verse by verse. That's right. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, first.
Yeah, so there's several thoughts we can talk afterwards, but the one thing I want to point out is that he mean in the second citation from Romans, that's a typo. That's not the text.
Oh, yeah.
I transcribed 16 manuscripts of that. It's not found in any of them.
Oh.
It's not found in Field's edition. It's only found in Minya.
Yes.
So you can cross that one off.
That's really great. Thank you. So, yes, is it this?
You want me to take Galatians 1:9?
Oh, it's Galatians 1:9. I just want to visualize this too, because I think 1:2, and it's in the commentary on Romans.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Great.
Yeah, so that's a typo. Meaning.
Yeah, it may go back to the manuscript that the video. I haven't looked it up in all the manuscripts, but I have a transcript from 16, and it's not on any of them, only in India.
Oh,
so
yes.
It could be a printer's error, or it could be a singular reading in the manuscript that India is coming from.
Yes.
But I'd caution against taking Minya as a critical edition.
Yes.
And TLT, Field's editions are way better.
Yes.
They're perfect. And there go with PDFs, but everything in TLT or Chrysostom is maniacal. For the omits.
So that's a good methodological lesson for us. Clark,
Yes, thank you.
next
very
question.
much. Yes, thank you very
Final
much.
question, actually.
Okay, I just, a quick question, are you looking, with your methodology, are you looking for variations in biblical text or just in the patristic citations? Because that would help understand, because things like they seem, that's just an
Yeah.
introductory statement used by the commentator, say, you're quoting somebody else.
Yeah.
So it count as very.
Yes, I agree. I would like to kind of sharpen up some of these the categories. When I encounter, in fact, yes, spacing, I would like to think of more of this as a kind of not rhetorical flourish, perhaps, but the author as guiding the readers. I would say it's not an addition to a text. It's not. Yes, facing. One thing I wanted to mention as well. I've kept this on the table. I mean, I don't have really mistaken this debate, but each time it is true. For my eyes, it's helpful to have the decimal 28 all kind of always beside on the table or on the next table or on the maybe on the screen, just helping to kind of envelop the reading and the kinds of comparisons that we are doing. But I agree with you. I think I want to be careful here to say that facing this language is on the part of the author to guide readers and not necessarily to change the content of the biblical text. Yes.
Let's give a warm applause.